This might not look like much, but this is where I'm going to be creating my dream garden. The goal is to turn this into a sort of food forest slash permaculture space, but first I had to tackle cleanup. So today I'm going to show you everything I've done so far to get the place ready. Back in early February, my first task that I started with was pruning. I have a bunch of fruit trees in the front yard. All these small ones were pretty easy to prune, but this ginormous fig tree that stood at the edge of the driveway was the final boss for me. Because this tree was so big, I kind of didn't really know what I was doing, but I did the best I could, taking it branch by branch. Really, I was just trying to reduce the size as much as possible, but not too much because I did read that you never want to prune more than a third of a fruit tree at once. So I definitely wasn't planning on pruning this entire tree in one go. And as I was doing work, it didn't really feel like I was doing much, but I did manage to clean it up a little bit. Basically, this bottom layer here, I was just trying to trim anything that was dead, diseased, or crisscrossing, but the top of the tree I was not able to get to. And I just had to accept the fact that it's going to be growing all these figs that I wouldn't be able to harvest, but that'll be another task for the following spring. I'll continue chipping away at it. In my backyard, the house came with a pool, but it had been previously filled in, which is actually perfect for me because I didn't really want a pool, didn't want to have to deal with maintaining the pool. I did like how the pool was already filled, so I was planning on using this as an extended garden area. I had to first, however, clear all the weeds. Now, it wasn't until we had a couple heavy rains that all these weeds started sprouting up. And I'll be honest, I thought this would be a very quick and easy thing, but the weeds were actually pretty deeply rooted. So I kind of had to do this over a few days, got my shovel, and just started piece by piece picking up the weeds. Eventually, I did end up getting an action hoe, which made the job so much more easier. Didn't have any footage of me doing it, but over the course of about a week, I was able to at least get all of these big, gnarly weeds out of the way. I also did a soil test, and the results came back not great. The area is really low in nitrogen, so I'm planning on putting some beans in here, but also amending the soil with a bunch of fertilizer. So at the end of the day, this pool is not perfect, but I think I did a pretty good job compared to where we started. At least I can start gardening in here. And next month, once the weather warms up, I will get this pool ready, and this will host mainly my squash, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, things like that. And in the back corner of my yard, I had this neglected patch of basically just dandelion and nettle, which I did not realize until after I cleared this whole patch that nettle is actually can be used in tea. People use the stems for making, cordage and whatnot. I still do have some nettle in my backyard, so maybe I will still use it, but this patch just had to go because it was kind of getting out of hand. So slowly, I went through, it only took me about an hour to get through this whole area. And I unfortunately am not able to use this area to garden vegetables because when the summer comes and this tree over here is in full bloom, it is going to shade out the area. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do here, but we'll see. And then about the second week of February, I had started sowing my seeds. This is the first year where I decided to start the majority of my plants from seed. Previously, I had just bought everything from the nursery, but I knew I wanted to do a lot. Probably spent about $200 worth of seeds from primarily Johnny's and also botanical interests. But I knew in the long run this would be cheaper than if I bought everything from nursery starts. Got a little bit of everything here: peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, cucumbers, some melons as well. It was a little difficult reading through all the packages. There's a lot of, rules I realized. So took me, the whole day to actually get everything properly seated. And then I put them in my room under a grow light and some heat mats, hoping for the best. And probably the biggest project that I had was making my garden bed. So I knew I wanted something that would last, but I also wanted it to have like a cute, rustic kind of look. So I learned about the shoshugi or yakisugi bond method of torching the wood and then sealing it with oil, tung oil, and it creates a long lasting weatherproof look. So initially, I wanted to do 3 beds about 4 by 10 feet long, and it took a while. I had to enlist my husband for help. We learned how to use power tools, which is a little scary, but we were able to get everything cut. And then, over about the course of a week, first we burned everything, then I sealed them with tung oil. I did about 2 coats. And because I had so many boards, it took a while for me to actually do everything. Once those were all dried, I enlisted my dad to also help. So him and my husband put together our beds here. After a few trips back and forth to the hardware store, we realized we used more nails than we thought. We finally had the beds completed. And I really love how these beds turned out. I'm hoping they last me, a good 5, 10 years. I really do like the look of the wood, even though the metal beds last forever. I just don't like the way they look. So, hoping the work I put in here to make these kind of weatherproof with the burning method works, but time will tell. When we also put some of this hardware cloth down because I didn't want the risk of any, gophers coming. I don't even know if I have gophers, but I'm just taking precaution. Better do this now up in the beginning versus having to do it later. Came out looking very nice. I don't think any gophers are going to be getting through this. Next, I wanted to do the kind of lasagna bed method of building up my beds before I filled it with dirt. I started off with grass clippings, but I quickly realized I did not have enough. So I just kind of did this very thin layer amongst all the beds. And then I was able to put some cardboard down. I have been hoarding cardboard since Christmas. So I'm glad I had enough to put a nice layer of cardboard down on all my beds. Then I had a bunch of leaves. So this winter, after the leaves fell from the trees, I saved them all in piles because I knew I would be using them come springtime. So I just gathered all of my leaves and put a nice layer at the bottom of the beds. So that was pretty much the extent of what I did for my lasagna fill. Then we got our dirt delivered, our soil delivered. I placed a bulk order for about 4.5 cubic yards of soil. This is just their basic, all around garden soil. So then after it was delivered, the next step was to actually fill the beds. So I just kind of got my shovel and wheelbarrow and did a lot of back and forth filling up the beds. Each bed probably took about 12 to 15 wheelbarrows full. It probably took me a week or two to fill all 3 beds just because it's kind of not backbreaking work, but it was kind of hot on the days I was working and I just don't like getting sweaty. So lots of breaks it took me, but going back and forth with the wheelbarrow did take some time. So I'm glad I didn't make my raised beds too high because this height was actually perfect for me to tip the wheelbarrow over versus having to shovel everything in. If it was any higher, it would have been a lot more annoying to actually get the dirt in. So took some pushing and shoving and shoveling the dirt around, but I was able to unload every pile of dirt efficiently. Then I had just raked everything over to make sure it was nice and flat. This bed, I didn't add anything extra to it. However, the other 2 beds in the back, when I filled them, I ended up using some compost and the Happy Frog raised bed soil to kind of fluff up the top. So as I start planting vegetables, I will see how well does the standalone, dirt do versus ones that were amended with additional things. At this point, it's still too cold for me to actually transplant, my tomatoes, peppers, and squash. But I did have some radish and a couple flowers. I decided to direct sow in this one bed. So first, I kind of just made these rows for 3 kinds of radishes. And I did also add a little bit of worm castings to the radish before I put the seeds in. So we'll see how those do. And the flowers I'm putting, sunflowers, some nasturtium. I also did put a cilantro in here direct sowed. So we will see how those do. And I made this little chart here to kind of remember where I planted everything. So hopefully as things come up, if I want to put other things, they don't, step on each other's toes. Now, I said before I have some cats. They actually came with the house, and I actually love cats. So, not that I'm mad at them being here, they're very cute. However, I do not want them using my raised beds as litter boxes. So, I tried this other method of using this garden fence, this plastic UV resistant, fence. I cut it to, maybe be 2 feet tall. And then I kind of just wrapped it around these T-posts. So because this fence should not be permanent, I do want to be able to remove the fence if I need to harvest anything or get into my beds. So rather than permanently adhere the fencing to the T-posts, I just found some, metal wire and kind of loosely hooked it around. So that way I could unhook it when needed. However, my husband saw me struggling here, so he helped me come up with this cute little doorway using some sticks where I could easily just kind of remove the stick and it would unfold the fence. So not the best, but it does get the job done so I could get in when needed. So of course I would prefer having no fence, but I have to live in harmony with the cats, I guess. So at least this will keep them out of the bed for now. Whew. So that was everything I have done so far. In my next video, the fun stuff begins. I'm going to be taking my seedlings. You can see since I first filmed, they have grown quite a bit. They're looking great. So I will be planting these into the raised beds. So if you'd like to follow along, make sure you subscribe.